Disclaimer: I am a therapist, but I am not your therapist. Any discussions of mental health are strictly based on my clinical experiences or current understanding of the topic. Nothing in my video should be taken as diagnosis, treatment, or formal services. Any scenarios constructed to elaborate on a topic or share an experience are hypothetical and should not be taken as identification with any actual persons, living or deceased. Hey everyone. So we wanted to talk about something, and I haven't put a ton of structured thought into this, so to some degree it's going to be just kind of by the seat of our pants.
Stream of thought.
Yeah. Let me set up the discussion, and then we can talk about kind of what we're going for. One of the things that I learned in Gestalt therapy was the notion that you speak with I statements. And what that means is rather than making generalized statements such as, you did this, accusations, or, a generalization like, they're like this, right? That kind of stuff, or the essentializing stuff we talk about. You speak with I statements. I feel, I think, I believe. For example, in that last segment about Scott Cawthon, I tended to use I statements about my feelings about the matter, about the difference of perspectives versus what I think are the demonstrable effects of one's choices. There's a difference between the objective effects of voting for Trump, for example, that is a general statement that is that is defendable by every stretch of the imagination, and an I statement, which is something that is more towards your perspective. It seems like a lot of people struggle with this, and I wanted to bring it up because it's something of a value that I hold, and it's a value that I want to have in our community. When you speak, do you own those words? Is that something that you stand by? Something that you 100% back? Because I think it's important to do so. A couple times now in the server, there's been this weird thing that happens where someone will start bringing something up, but rather than getting to their question, saying, I have a question, or I am confused by this, they will bring it up as a generalization, making an assertion. Yeah, Jared, sadly it is. But the fact is that, in a lot of ways, I think it's important for us to work on this because it is a difference of mindfulness, right? Ash said, I statements also come across as more assertive than they do aggressive. Correct. There's actually an entire school of thought on this called nonviolent communication, which is I statements discussing here's, what I observed, here are my feelings, here are my needs, and then here are any behavioral changes, should there be need for any. It's actually a really effective system, though it can be problematic in some way. I do think it's effective, though. And my point for bringing this up is that I want to offer you guys a perspective on this because I think it's actually really important. Namely, that how you think about this matters kind of a lot. Specifically, if you're trying to understand clearly what a person is meaning to say, I think I statements are really important because what they do is it's a lot easier to understand that someone is speaking from a place of curiosity, fear, question, or just plain ignorance. I think it's a way to sort of de-escalate the situation. I feel and I believe. If someone says, I believe, for example, like a conversation that happened in our chat, that bisexual people can't be attracted to non-binary people because they're attracted to both genders and non-binary people don't have a gender, that would be one thing. But when someone says they can't, they make a generalization about that, assuming that is the rule. That is a difference of discussion. Because the issue we get into there is that essentially what happens is that you're no longer saying that this is from your perspective the way things are. You're not saying and owning this and taking it for the one person's view that it is. Instead, what you're doing is trying to strengthen it by making it seem like this is objective reality. This is doubly fucked up if it never comes from a bi person. right? If you're in the middle of a fucking the discourse and just stating random shit, Crease, I have been trying very hard to express myself using I statements to make it clear what is my own feelings. Good, fucking keep it up. Yeah, Matt. So you're saying it's important to do this as an emission of perspective? Yeah, because here's the thing. Is people are like, this is unnecessary. I always assume this. This would be an argument I'd get in with Hanging Wednesday again and again. And over time, it's going to be there till the day we die. But I still hold to the notion that owning your speech, owning your language is still really... Yes, this is how to have nuance 101. Owning your speech, owning your language means that you take into consideration that you are yourself a limited being and you have a limited amount of knowledge. One of the things I try to do on this channel is I make my perspective known, and I try to speak in I statements as much as I can, as much as I remember, God forbid my ADHD brain. And the major reason why I do this, and the major reason why I try to, is because despite the fact that I do have expertise in counseling, and I do have a degree in psychology, the fact of the matter is that it's not an issue. It's not something that I want to be held in some kind of like unassailable way. I don't want it to be seen like my stuff is more important than anyone else's. I do think people who are on the server that are clinicians do get a little bit more weight because they have studied this stuff, but we can be wrong too. But I think that's a better, more nuanced, and maybe a little bit of a harder perspective to take than either the anti-intellectualism of some folks where they just ignore expertise, or the hardcore hierarchy of just always thinking expertise is true. Sometimes this stuff is hard. Like I said, or one person mentioned, Minerva, that is, how to have nuance 101. And so I think it's important for us to use these I statements. If you don't understand something, and I'll use the bi-pan debate again, if you don't understand the difference between bi and pan people, then you need to own that shit. If you can't, if you just want to throw out a generalization saying something about bi people, and people who are bi or pan get pissed at you, and then you double down on that, that's going to get rough. Tiamat said, do you think the commonality of not using I statements is the aggressive manner? I think it's a major factor, such as the tendency to attach one's personal values to validity of one's point of view when there's an argument presented against it. Yes, I think there's a tendency for people to not own it and not acknowledge the fact that they have a personal attachment to that information. There's a way in which we try to always aim for this greater level of objectivity without ever owning the fact that we want the world to be like it is. Ash, what do you mean? You don't understand what? Give me more data. Yes, a bi-panda. Yes. Lucy Cypher's correct. We need to talk more about the bi-panda discourse.
Venus had something further back as well that I thought might be worth addressing.
I'll bring up the chat. Yes, so here's the thing. Using I statements and saying it's only my opinion is patronizing. Yes, it absolutely can be, Venus. What I would say to that, though, is that the way you handle that is that if they're trying to make a general statement as an opinion, that is something that they're trying to make an objective statement about, and then they go into the level of like trying to do that thing. I would actually say then, and this is what we're trying to cultivate on the server, is fucking back your shit with data.
Yeah.
Like, if you're going to make a statement, then you need to actually give sources. Open to looking at actual sources after the stream to educate myself. Yeah, sure. So real quick, Ash, to just give you a quick thing, the Pan Discourse, if you go into the allosexual discussion channel, you'll notice there was a discussion there that got kind of weird. It's been settled and dealt with. I don't want anyone bothering anyone, but it has a weird tendency to it, and I think it needs more discussion. We'll get more to the specifics later, but right now I want to talk about this on a more general level. Mouse, I wonder, Jess, isn't it incorrect or ineffective to preface I statements with a reference to fact or consideration when discussing alleged situations and circumstances? Yes and no. It depends, Mouse, on what you're doing. So I would argue that, like, if you're saying, my understanding of the allegations against such and such are this, I still think that needs I statements. No, you're fine. That's not a tangent. That's just getting more clarification. You're good. Ash, you're fine. But Mouse, like, another example of this would be is if someone says, I believe that trans people are valid, that's stupid. It just is. Because the demonstrable effect is that the science in every conceivable way says that trans people are valid. I happen to believe in that, and I have an attachment to it as a person who's trans, but I think in that circumstance you would own it. So this does come down to a level of nuance because you have to look at it from a situational perspective. In that case, I would say, this is what the data says, and I back this data because it falls within my values. And again, if the data doesn't fall within your values, ideally as a rational person, what we should do is change our values. But the problem is that gets hard and people don't always want to do that. But I think that's kind of how discourse has to move. Slowly, difficultly, and people are going to have to pull up some perspectives. We're talking about this in a very general sense. And my sense of it is that if we don't do this, it's very easy to bounce back and forth in a way that's very confusing. Oh, Sega, we'll see you later. Love you so much, Sega. Venus. Everyone say bye to Venus.
Bye.
Yes, no, I agree, Patricia, that Bi Panda should be added to the server's own lingo. I believe it is the thing that will bridge the gap between Bi and Pan Discourse.
Somebody would like to help make a drawing for an emoji?
We accept fan art. Nothing not safe for work, unless you really want to, I guess.
We don't have not safe for work channels on our thing at the moment. That's a lot to moderate.
I guess you put it in consent. I don't know. Whatever. It's a Mott and Bailey. I'm saying an objective thing. Oh no, it's just in my opinion. Yeah, that is exactly a Mott and Bailey. Because you're saying because what you're doing is it goes both ways, right? So in this case, the Mott would be the thing of like, I think all of this group of people should be destroyed, and then the Bailey is like, well, like, no, but science backs me. Like, that gets into a weird position because that looks more defensible, but it also can go the other way too, right? That's a hard one. I have to think about that one for a minute, but I think it's a good point, Minerva.
Yeah, I think especially with I statements, the big evaluation that we're doing right now.
Tiamat could be either a deflection or a Mott and Bailey. Continue.
Yeah, but the big evaluation we're doing right now is somebody arguing in good faith or not? Right? All of these things are coming down to that. I statements are great for, identifying your emotions and owning that, but there is a way that can be used in a negative way. Okay? So that's kind of where the nuance is what argument, am I arguing good faith?
I don't know who Viri Rona is, but they're fantastic. That sounds similar to people using the science can be wrong. Yeah, that's bullshit. We're not saying the science can be wrong nonsense. What we're saying is that there is the idea that when you come across data that you don't necessarily understand or don't necessarily agree with, you need to look at its methodology, and if it turns out to be solid, then you need to reevaluate your perspectives. The thing is that I think it's important to recognize that we have a personal attachment to this data. The reason why we use data is because it backs our views, right? Beyond just the fact that we feel philosophically right about the fact that trans people should have rights, all the data that we have also suggests that trans people should damn well have rights because there's nothing wrong with them. By the way, this Bi Panda is a little too black and white. That joke is wonderful and should go down in history as amazing. Go ahead.
Do we want to talk a little about this in terms of like relationship?
Sure, go ahead.
So I statements, and just you can kind of hop in for, as you want. I find are really helpful in relationships to my PMDD folks, my folks with anxiety, dealing with internal stuff, saying, giving those context clues to the people that you love and the people, who are in your life with you can be really helpful and really important. I'm feeling really cranky right now. I just had a massive emotional shift, and I'm gonna cry soon. Right? These are all things, these I statements can be really helpful when we're arguing, because suddenly now my partner has the context of what's going on with me. Or like, I know you're telling me this, the thing that keeps coming up in my mind is this thing, and it keeps feeling like this, and I'm really struggling with that feeling in me. Right?
Yeah, it's the difference between like you're being too irritable towards me versus I feel like you're irritable towards me. Is that accurate or not? Like it's including the other person in some ways.
Yeah. The effect, or something like, you know, the effect that I'm feeling when I hear you say this is crappy or good or irritating, right? That's acknowledging that the other person, you know, is saying something, and maybe that, you know, they might have other meaning going on, but that effect is different for you.
Yeah, Brittany, just to give your statement there, I think that does have a layer there. I do think there's a level of legitimacy versus inclusion. And again, as I've stated, I think there's a difference in priority. My general argument, for those who don't know, is that I believe bi and pan's differences are really more one based on priority. That is, how do you prioritize attraction? Bi people, for example, are attracted more what seems to be more physical, the physical aspects of gender, whether that's non-binary, male, female, whatever. Again, we're talking about bimodal, not bi as in two. If we're talking about pan seems to go based on more emotional stuff. Gender seems to be more sort of a side thing and more based on the person as a whole. There could be an argument made there to discuss like some of the overlap there with maybe demi a little bit, because there does seem to be that emotion to attraction level, but that's getting into a lot more like really like
there's another level of like attraction
discussion there that's a lot of nuance and a lot of stuff I don't want to get into now.
Yeah.
But the thing here is that that's kind of what it is I think those subjects do exist, Brittany, and I think one of the problems is, or at least my goal is that I have the fear that the continued levels of those discourses are hurting us. I think it's a lot more effective to sort of describe them effectively and then move the fuck on. It's actually one of the things that I don't like is that I will pick on Vosh for just a second. Vosh tends to say that bi and pan are not different. He tends to say they're not separate. I disagree with this vehemently. And I think at some level, I'm going to guess, though, that I think he does too. If someone didn't care, my idea would be is that they would essentially bounce between the two things, because both of them would be valid or both of them would be equivalent. But he settles on pan for a reason. Even if that reason is just perspective, even if it's just even if that's just the affectation of I like the pan flag better, there's still a difference, right? Fury Rona said, I identify as bi because I feel a different kind of attraction to different types of gender. Yep. That also includes non-binary. Pan for me would mean my attraction is unrelated to gender. Yep, we are on the same fucking page. Hell yeah. Yeah. I usually call myself Debbie Pan. Weaver, it's good language. It's good language. Well, and again, like, this is a brief tangent. Bear with me. So, I know we've gone way off the rails on the I statement stuff, but I'll say this. I think there's an interesting discussion to see what we can learn from asexual people and demi people, because I think there's something in there that demi people are pointing at that points to why bi and pan are different. And I think demi people show it because there's a way in which their attraction, once they've hit that demi switch and they turn on, so to speak. No pun intended.
I'm chuckling.
No pun.
Here.
No pun intended. Demi as fuck.
Absolutely.
Cannot be shut down. Just.
Goddamn.
Yeah. But again, like, that's a thing.
So
the best pun.
The way I tend to think of this is that sometimes we have used sexual orientation language to describe what gender somebody is, and then what genders they're attracted to. Okay? But other orientations on this list start describing the how. Okay? And like the cultural narrative that I grew up with gave me one way for how people are attracted to people. And that's not true at all. Like, there isn't one way. Attraction is built up of tons of different things. So that how argument, how attraction comes up, how it feels, what order things come up in, right? What that attraction means to you. What that is, that feeling, sexual, or is it just snuggly, right? There's a whole different levels here. This is a much larger conversation. That's how I think of things, food for thought.
We'll go back to that more in a minute, but I do think this is important, is like, you'll notice in this discussion, hey Gina, sorry, had a room flashback. I did not hit her. I did not. Oh, hi, Mark. So anyway, my point is that coming back to the own speech thing, I think one of the importance of this is that you'll notice through that whole dialogue about bi-pan stuff, no, we're not going back into it. Stop. One of the things that we're trying to get into is this idea that, yes, I'm glad you're okay. I'm sorry you had to get stitches, Gina. Sending love. Everyone give Gina love in chat. Please, send love. But I think the thing with the own statements thing is you'll notice there in that we were talking about our perspectives, the way we experience or the way we conceive of these things. I can't say what bi is for every bi person. I can't say what being pan is for every pan person. I can only tell you what I know from clients, what I know from my experience as a pansexual person. I can't tell you what it's like for every person. I can tell you what the averages are in my experience and what those experiences have done to inform my perspective. This is nuance. This is how we talk about these things. And I think if you look at the debate circuit, if you look at the way people on a lot of Twitch and a lot of people talk about this stuff, there's a tendency to sort of use very, very strong language to discuss things. And I don't have a problem with that. If you're yelling at Nazis, cool, use strong language. I don't give a fuck. But if we're talking to one another, if we're talking about in-house discourse about a particular thing, we need to use different tools for different things. I think you use forceful language with your enemies. I think you use much more skillful means when you're dealing with people in community. And especially when it comes to our friends, our loved ones, etc.
Yeah. And I think especially I statements are really useful because not every word may encompass everything that is going on with you. There are definitely times where like that sexual orientation label might not cover everything. It might not be all expansive. So you might need to start using those I statements to be like, here's all these different experiences that I'm having. Here's where this label kind of fits, but here's where I kind of need to go off on my own and give better descriptions, right? Those I statements are great for adding that extra nuance to this word, right? These words kind of are limited in their definitions, okay? And some of that is definitely a struggle, but that's my thoughts, so.
So I was just going to share this real quick because I feel like it is related to what we're talking about. So I am no expert in this. Let me be very clear, but I do think it's an interesting thing. Let's go main camera view down. There we go. So I really like this graphic. It is by this person, Agile42, copyright, like them. They're cool. I don't know where you find them, but find them. This got sent to me by another therapist, so I did not find this. But this is what nonviolent communication looks like. What I hear you say is this. So let's use this in a discussion. So if you're having a discussion with your partner and there's some very real difficulties with the conversation, one of the things that could happen is that you'll get into this very emotional state where you will essentially start to wonder or think, you know, are they even listening to me? Do they actually care? I don't even know where they're at, all that stuff. And what's really useful about this system is it allows for both of you, from an active listening perspective, to really support one another. So let's say Zena is upset because I didn't do something. And Zena says, what I observed is that you said you were going to do this chore, but you didn't. If I don't do a chore, what feelings come up for you?
Cranky,
Irritation, frustration.
Kind of devalued, so come up and sometimes in there too. I know it's not an intended one necessarily, but
yeah, but it's good to acknowledge it. We can talk about off this map a little bit into like what projection looks like, but generally speaking, I think you're just sharing feelings here. We're not judging them, we're not critiquing them, we're just talking about them. You get into needs where, from there, what needs do you have around house stuff?
I need people to help put in work when they say they will and help share the division of labor, also the mental labor that goes into planning and accomplishing stuff.
Holy shit.
That happened.
Holy shit, we're at 1,000, folks. Holy shit. We'll continue the thought. Go off for new needs. We can talk about this after.
And there's a specific need that comes up where not having to be the one to keep track of a lot of things or everything.
Yeah, so there's a need of not being the only person doing this stuff, need of being supported and getting these things done. Yeah. So what requests would you have for me?
If you could still take some time to get the chore done.
Maybe be more diligent in remembering it?
Yeah, and maybe make a plan with me about when to get things done might also be really helpful, right?
Woot, woot, woot. We're at 1,000.
Huh? And we're having a serious discussion here. And I'm like trying to piece through like to give people an accurate like thing, and we're just watching this number. It just keeps flipping to it, and God, this is great.
Sorry, I got excited.
No, I want to be excited too. And I'm like, I'm trying to switch gears between emotions right now, and I'm like, all right, really focused, but excited, but really focused, and just...
So, but does everyone understand that? So we start from the observed thing. This is the objective thing I saw, but you're still owning it. Like, I saw that. That is the thing. This is how it made me feel. This is what needs come up from that. And there's a request. I'll try to include a link to a similar graphic or something else there, or maybe a good website if anyone has anyone for nonviolent communication. But this is a good example of how I language can be very helpful. I think it really does support good conversation. And I think it's important for us to do that. Yes, by the way, everyone celebrating in chat, you are more than good to celebrate. Keep it up. You guys are great. Love you all. But does all this make sense? Are we on the same page? Does that make sense? Okay. Hoggers.
practice the stuff. And if you're on the server, same page checks are great. Hey, what's your intention? Hey, I don't really understand where you're coming from on this one, right? You don't get text on a screen is not great. And try to be honest, you know?
Cool. Yeah. So I think this is good for there, but I do want to have more of these conversations in the future. Different ways to improve discourse. And so I did like someone's thing of like, what is nuance 101? This is going to be a messy conversation for people, but hopefully they stick through it. I might do a bumper at the beginning saying, I know we went off on the rails because of the 1,000 thing, but whatever.
This channel is full of ADHD.
Stop it. If you like this video, like, comment, subscribe. There'll be a bumper after this to remind you, but please feel free to donate. Donations super help. They allow us to buy better equipment. We're currently in the process for saving up. We're halfway there for a new camera, and they really help. Streamlabs.com/transgirltherapist/tip. We also have a Patreon. The link will be after the video. Anyway, lots of love to you all.
Love you all. Thanks for talking with us.
Yep, and we will see you in the next one. I hope you enjoyed the video, and thank you for watching. Please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Also consider donating to the channel. You can donate at streamlabs.com/transgirltherapist/tip or at patreon.com and become a patron. Patreon.com/transgirltherapist.